You're listening to Sending the Experts with Georgina Durrant. This podcast is all about teaching and supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. My name is Georgina Durrant. I'm the host of this podcast brought to you by Twinkle SEND. As a former teacher and Senko myself, I wanted to create a platform to share some of the amazing things that my guests are doing to support learners of SEND. So whether you're listening on your commute, tuning in whilst walking your dog, or curled up on the sofa with a nice cup of coffee, thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, I'm really excited to be joined by Robert White. Robert White describes himself as the only Asperger, gay, dyslexic, cross-lateral, quarter Welsh, web-toed, hypersensitive, gluten-intolerant, pseudo-genius musical comedian there is, probably. And you, our listeners, probably know him from his hilarious performances on Britain's Got Talent in 2018, where he gained second place. Robert is a comedian and he worked his way up the stand-up scene starting in 2004 and found early success as a finalist in the prestigious Hackney Empire competition in 2006. He has gone from strength to strength and in 2010 won the Malcolm Hardie Main Awards at the Edinburgh Festival. He is now a sought-after act who regularly performs in big clubs, little clubs, and those in between, theatres and festivals around the UK and abroad. He divides his time between comedy and gigs, tours, and whatever else comes up, writing songs and musicals and talking to people about autism. I had the pleasure of watching him live at the NASON Awards last year, where he presented the awards and treated the audience to a comedy performance, and he was absolutely brilliant. Hi, Robert. I'm so excited to be talking to you. Can I just say congratulations on Britain's Got Talent for 2018 and all your work since then. And I absolutely loved watching you at the NASON Awards. I was having a coffee with some of the people on my table afterwards, and I was saying to them, I need to get him on my podcast. He's brilliant. So how are you?
Well, I'm fine. It was lovely both to do Britain's Got Talent and to do the Mason Awards. I have to say I earned more money from doing the Mason Awards because Britain's Got Talent is one of those things. It just gives you a platform. It was great to do. Very long time ago now. Yeah. But no, I do all sorts of different gigs, as you very well read off my little bio. And the Mason Awards, it was, I suppose, because I autistic. It was related because the Mason Awards is to do with special educational needs resources. And yeah, so I was invited. I did it. Thank you for thinking that I'm funny.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I laughed so much. So I'm really, really lucky that I get to interview lots of sort of experts on special educational needs on the podcast. But I'm always keen to ensure that I have like the real experts on there, people like yourself who have lived experience of special educational needs, being autistic and dyslexic. So I'd love to know more about your background. When were you diagnosed as autistic?
I was originally diagnosed as cross-lateral when I think I was like 10 or something, and I'd done odd things. I think at primary school I'd wrapped the one of those long climbing ropes round my neck, and it looked as if I was trying to commit suicide, but I wasn't. I just thought, why don't I do this? That looks fun.
Oh dear.
And but odd things like that. Once when my mum sent me to my room, I dressed up my large cuddly toy panda in my own clothes, chucked it out the window. So when it went sailing past where she was having lunch, she thought I'd committed suicide. So that was I was odd, but then other times I was very sort of cheeky and funny, and I was just an odd kid. So in late 1980s, I went and I was diagnosed cross-lateral, and what that means is your strong hand usually is the opposite way around to your strong eye, and that has some sort of relation to the sides of the brain you use. But in me, my strong hand and my strong eye, I think, are both on the same side or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, what it really meant was, we don't know what's going on. This is the late 1980s. We are West Sussex County Council, and we're not going to diagnose you with anything which is of any significance at all. So I went through my whole secondary school being thought to be dyslexic, but not actually any assistance or help for it. And then I got to university, and I went for a dyslexic test because I thought it would get me a free computer, which it did. And while I was there, they kept pushing for this autism test, and I thought, why are you doing that? But I know I didn't do it there. It was only a few years later, once I was in therapy after various sort of traumatic events had done, a whole sort of things to my life, that it was then a case of, oh, we can see the wood for the trees now. What is it? So when I was in my early 20s, he says, eventually getting to answer your question, I was initially, it was suggested to me by this therapist I went to for sort of depression and stuff, that I might be autistic. Asperger's, she said, which now is, a term of questionable usage, etc. And because I looked in the book and because it fitted me so much, I didn't get a formal diagnosis until my mid-30s to late 30s. So about 10 years ago. I know, because for me, it was just enough for someone to go, look, this is what's going on. And I went, that's what's going on.
Yeah, just enough to sort of understand yourself and make things make sense.
And it was only later that I realized that I probably needed a bit more sense making.
Yeah. So what was school like for you, being undiagnosed? So they didn't know you were dyslexic, they didn't know you were autistic. What was it like?
Well, I was in the special class where everyone else was sick, and I was writing symphonies, and, which is probably a very disparaging way to describe both them and me. But I had no friends. My one friend I had two friends. One was the piano, and the other was toast and peanut butter, and other forms of food. I got to the age of 16 and I was 16 stone, comfort eating, lifelong bulimia, which destroyed my insides and rotted my teeth, suicidal thoughts all my life, depression, blah, 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 blah. School was horrific. I remember in my first year of school, there was a maths test at the end of the first year. And at the end of the maths test, last page was this little sort of IQ puzzle thing. And the only two boys in the school to get that right were the clever maths boy and this odd naughty boy who they didn't really quite understand. And they pulled me into the headmaster's office to ask how I cheated. And seen the other kids' paper the other side of the room. How can you do that? So impossible. So I know this is supposed to be sort of light and hilarious and stuff, and I'm a comedian and stuff, but without diagnosis, without help, these things can be horrific.
That's not, I wanted you on here for that reason as well. I get that you're a comedian, but obviously this time in your life isn't funny, and it was really hard. And I think it's important for teachers to realize the importance of diagnosis and the importance of children understanding themselves, because if they don't understand themselves, the implications for mental health is huge, isn't it?
Yes, I as I've got 20 years that pays testament to it. I've got a set of teeth that pays testament to it. I've got quite a lot of money paid on therapy that pays testament to it. So
absolutely. So were there any parts of school that you did enjoy? You say music, was that something that was your thing?
I played the piano all the time. I was in the music room all the time on my own in a little piano sound boothy room, and that was me. And I used to write little songs, and really that is what saved me. Both playing piano at school, and I had a piano in my room at home, and I'd constantly bang out out of tune tunes on my broken piano at home, or one of the dodgy old pianos at school. And that's what I did. I wrote music.
And that was your thing. Brilliant. And
that was it.
Looking back at your time at school then, what do you wish teachers had done differently? What do you wish, what support do you wish they'd been for you? What could have helped?
Well, I suppose firstly, the basic recognition of difference, that this kid might be there. Then some element of differentiation between different people with different special needs, not just lumping them all into one room and going, look, you're all the same. Some understanding that with difference comes ability as well, and it's not just a case of you being put in a box marked, well, we don't understand him, therefore he can't do anything. And just noticing the signs. I remember once being in an assembly, and this person had come to talk about, homeless children in Brazil or something. And he said a rhetorical question to the class: hands up anyone in the class who hasn't got a friend. I don't understand rhetorical questions, and I didn't have any friends.
Yeah.
So I put my hand up. Now, nowadays, they might go, something's going on there. But back then, they just thought I was taking the mick and having a joke about a very sensitive subject of poor, destitute kids. So that instead of being this kid who was friendless and misunderstood, I was someone who was taking the piss out of kids that were friendless and misunderstood. And that's how I was treated. But what else could there's all sorts. I think my main rule of thumb for education is that the autistic child's life or the dyslexic child's life should reflect the autistic or dyslexic adult's life. One thing that teachers like to do if kids can't write, if kids are dyslexic, is to get them to write neatly all the time.
Yeah.
But as a dyslexic adult, I don't do that.
No.
If I write messages to my agent or to my friends or just around the place, it's as rough as anything. But if I write a script or if I write, an official document, I have the ability to write well.
Yeah.
And similarly, lots of parents I know worry about their kids only eating one or two things.
Yeah.
As if it's a real sort of detriment to their life. Well, I eat the same meal day in, day out. Yes, you do gradually grow to like more things over the years, and you should try and have a healthy diet. But I suppose for the last 3 or 4 years, every day I've been having baked potato, green beans, peppers or onions, and then fruit. And I have that day in, day out, and I like it. So I think one thing for teaching is that the autistic adult experience is just a different experience. It's not a wrong experience, and it's not wrong for the children to be growing towards that, because that's what they're likely to have. If you think about it, there's people who couldn't exist without football, and there's other people who couldn't exist without their local choir, and there's other people who couldn't exist without religion. And some people think, oh, it's because they live for their family or whatever. There's all these different ways of being. And if you have a kid whose way of being is sort of drastically different to your own, it doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means it's different. And you should be educating that child and growing that child to be them as an adult.
Yes, absolutely. And not trying to change them, trying to realize who they are and learn more about it, rather than try and change them to be more neurotypical. Yeah, absolutely. So was university a better time for you then when you went to university? What did you study at uni?
University, I studied music, composition. Yeah, it's an odd one though, because I still couldn't do people. So I think at university, in the summer holiday between my first and second years, I wrote a symphony, and I got a mini orchestra together.
Wow.
And that was an orchestra. It basically was outside of the curriculum, because the curriculum taught like modern, what they call it. I think there's an umbrella term of 20th century compositions that will count minimalism and expressionism and Stravinsky and Schoen, but basically all music that sounds anything that sounds like that. Whereas I was writing music with a tune, I was writing tonal music.
Wow.
And that wasn't included so I did all of my own back, got it together. But the outcome of that was, I thought, oh, I'm having to work with 16 people. That's a bit awkward. So then in my third year, I wrote for a little jazz group, which was 8 people. And I thought, oh, I'm having to work with 8 people. That's a bit awkward. So then I worked with singers. So it's just me and a singer. And I thought, oh, that's a bit awkward. And then eventually I just stopped. I just wrote for myself and put it in a drawer. Because one of the big things about this industry is that so much is to do with making connections.
Yeah.
So much more is to do with being nice and knowing the right people than actual ability.
Yeah.
If you've got ability, it really, really helps when you get the opportunities. But to get the opportunities in the first place, people skills is, it's just up there. And if you haven't got them, then everything you do goes in a drawer.
Oh, yeah. So it impacted on that as well. That's really
Yeah.
hard.
But it was. I'm not saying it is all horrific. I got to play in. I got to play in bands. I did connect with some people. I made friends. Whereas at secondary school, I didn't really have that many friends. I had friends in a little music group when I was in secondary school, but not wider friends. At university, I wasn't being bullied and picked on.
Yeah.
There isn't that, because primary school, oh, Robert's just Robert. Secondary school, oh, Robert's different. It's wrong to be different.
Yeah.
University, everyone's a bit more mature and like, well, just be who you are. And from that way, there wasn't the weight of being picked on constantly. And that's what I then realized I was gay, because I stopped hating myself for being fat, and I needed something else to hate myself for. And then that sort of went all sort of complicated and stuff. But I think university did get me some friends, some connections, and did move me on slightly. Although we're talking about moving on slightly a person who's got lots of complexities, so it's baby steps.
Yeah. Absolutely. If we move on to after university, then. So after university, you trained to be a teacher. I was excited to read that you used to be a teacher.
Yeah.
How long for, and what made you want to do teaching? Tell me about teaching.
All right. So what happened was, I came out of prison and I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to be a composer. And as a musician, there are very few areas of work that you can go into. So I thought, well, I'll go into teaching, because that way I can teach and do composition alongside. And I did the course, and I didn't like one placement, and one placement I liked very, very much indeed, which was a private girls' school. It was brilliant, and the music teachers themselves thought I was brilliant, and they thought I was a bit odd, but they thought I was brilliant. And then I went to get my first teaching placement, and I told the headmaster I had the criminal record. He accepted the criminal record. After 9 weeks of being there, he got me into his office and said that I was being let go because of my criminal record. Because whilst he had accepted me, the local area authority hadn't.
Oh, so it was overruled.
I know. Unfortunately, because of no diagnosis for autism, and because of everything that had gone on with prison, the relationship with my parents had broken down, because my mum basically couldn't take anymore. So when that happened, and I turned to my parents, they said, well, you can't come home. And because the flat went with the teaching job, I basically effectively then was homeless.
Oh my goodness.
So that then scuppered teaching for a very long time. But also what scuppered teaching was the fact that my heart was still into composition. Yeah. So over the last 20 years, I've done that placement of teaching, the teaching course, which I really enjoyed when I was at the girls' school. And then the first job, which fell through because of what I just said. Then I've done another job, which was only a part-time job, it was covering maternity leave until they were finding someone else or something, and I thought that was really great, but my heart was still torn. So at the end of that, that's when I discovered comedy, and then I was going, oh, maybe this is something I can do. And then I've done another primary school recently. I like 2017, I did a primary school placement teaching music, and that was great. And then the last one I did in 2020, after the pandemic,
Yep.
I did a year at primary school in Crawley, and I really enjoyed that. And that's basically the first job I've ever done for a year that I really enjoyed, and that they'd really want me back.
Brilliant.
And the reason I did it was because when I was homeless, when I was younger, from then there's always been this little thing that sat on my shoulder saying you need a proper job. So even though I'd been getting, you know, £1,000-3,000 corporates from comedy, and I'd been earning enough money and gigs and everything, and people wanted me, but still this little thing was on my shoulder. So after the pandemic, I said to myself, give up comedy, do teaching. So I did a year doing 3 days a week in this primary school as I kept on comedy, planning to reduce it down. And after doing a year at this school, it taught me, instead of teaching me, well, you can do teaching now, it taught me, you have got teaching now, so you don't have to do it and you can choose what you want to do. So then in 2020, just gone, last September,
yeah,
for the first time in my life, I think I've wiped away this little thing off my shoulder, because I know I can do teaching if I want to.
Brilliant.
I
so
have got
quietened him down.
Yeah, it's so basically since then I've whacked up the comedy, and I've upped my Instagram, upped my TikTok. I've got many more gigs. I've started to tour. I've started writing for a autistic cartoon which you might know, called Pablo.
Yeah, I know Pablo. That's fantastic.
We're doing a new series of that, and I'm doing some episodes and stuff of that. And
Oh,
I've got
wow.
I've got a musical I'm working on, which I've been working on for a long time, but it looks as if things are starting to happen now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes without saying that when people are watching this, they're not just going to learn about autism from what I'm saying, but they're also going to learn about autism from how I'm saying it. In that they're, you know, even as an adult, people who are watching, a simple question is asked, and the amount of backstory you need. I in my head, I'm thinking, be concise. Be concise.
I love it.
No, but yeah. So yes, the simple answer is yes. Yes, I have done teaching.
If you did it like that, it would be the shortest podcast ever, though, wouldn't it? If you answer my questions so concisely. So I'm pleased you're going into detail, Robert. It's brilliant. I've really enjoyed listening to it. Tell me about Britain's Got Talent then, because there'll be people listening who want to know about that, definitely, because I remember watching you on there and you were so funny.
It was great.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more. You're gonna have to go in more detail.
All right then. I was going the other way that way. I would say it was exciting. It was a bit of a buzz. Everyone to do with the show itself were great. There were some issues after the show, agent related, but I think, you know, that's, you know, there's an element to which everything's got its downside. But I think the show itself is a nice show, and all the judges seemed decent, nice people, and it was just quite a weird, odd, exciting time. What would you like to know about it specifically?
I don't know. What's Simon like?
Simon doesn't really speak, so you don't really know. I don't know whether he's got one brain cell or if he's got a PhD and, you know, 5 memberships to Mensa. He really doesn't say much. Behind those eyes, you don't see much. But that way, I think he's honest, and he speaks about what he knows about when you see him on the program, and he knows what he's talking about when it comes to music and singers and stuff. I just thought maybe when it came to comedy, he wasn't totally on what I do, but then that's why he's got other people on the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. And was it nervous going on the stage, or did you enjoy that part when you were stood up there in front of everybody?
All right, so autistic, bright lights, sound,
Yeah, bit of a sensory overload.
people understand. It's always, even now it's still a thing, but the way I've got round all of that, he says, touch wood, is I sort of do things by numbers.
Okay.
So understanding, I look out into an audience and I get empirical data which substitutes for not having intuitive social skills, and I add up everything about the room and I make a sort of complex pattern of everything that's going on, and I consciously think of my senses and my people skills at the same time as doing the gig, which may seem complicated. And if you're a comedian who just walks on and does everything from your sort of gut confidence, it seems over the top. But then again, if you think about multiplying up the two different things, if you multiply up as a sort of numerical process from 100-seat theatre to a 400-seat theatre to 7 million people on TV, that is a thing that you can do the calculations to do that. If you try and multiply up just a basic gut reaction to 7 million people, then your gut ends up being on the floor. So I sort of had a benefit in the fact that I had a lot of thought through processes for what I was doing, because I didn't really think 7 million people. I just thought that person there, the lights there, the speakers are there, I can hear that, I'm doing that, I'm looking, I was calculating, because that's what I have to do anyway.
That seems such a more logical way of doing it almost. It seems to make more sense if you think about it than just going off your gut and trying to think of it from that. That seems more logical. I like it.
Well, the number of people who get on stage just through confidence is, well, people do have their processes, but there is a lot of, I'm here, this is my general confidence. You see it in comics all the time, and, good on them, because if they can, and if I could, I would. But I was just sort of slightly lucky that I didn't have to rely on my stomach, because if you've got stomach for confidence and you multiply it up, it's very quickly it's very closely situated to another part of your body.
Moving swiftly on from that, so how can people find out about you and what you do? Do you visit schools, Robert, still? Do you do do schools invite you there? Is that something you want to do? Or I'm just thinking, teachers listening,
I do school visits. You can go on my website, robertwhitecomedy.com, at Robert White Joke. I'm doing a talk at the end of the week in Llandudno, and I'm going into a school there. I do comedy gigs. I do lots of Instagram and TikTok, which is very different from what I do in school. But if you go on my website, I have got an autism page as well, which has more like the sort of things I do. And I do schools for autism. Hopefully I'll be doing schools with sort of music workshops soon. I don't know. I've got so much I want to do. I've written this musical, which is basically, there's David Williams. When I did Britain's Got Talent, and I asked him if I could write a musical for one of his books, he said yes, and I've done that.
Oh wow!
And that's now got chosen to be showcased at the Oxford Playhouse in May.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully we'll get a producer. If we get a producer, that goes on tour, and working with youth music theatre groups and writing musicals and stuff is basically what I want to get into. So when my life stalled at the age of 20 and composition went to the wall, ever since then I've basically been trying to get back in. So hopefully that'll start happening a bit more soon. But you can look on my website for visits to schools.
Brilliant.
And all of my bits.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think, like we were saying earlier, about how important it is for teachers to realize an autistic child becomes an autistic adult. It's really useful for autistic children to have autistic adult role models, isn't it? So having people who are autistic coming into the school is a useful thing for autistic children and their neurotypical peers as well. So that'll be really useful. So I will put your website in the show notes for people to click on and find out more.
Brilliant.
And thank you so much, Robert. You've been brilliant. I really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Hope it hasn't been too heavy.
No.
And have a lovely day. And thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. He was a great guest. As I said, I've popped the link to his website in the show notes below, so do have a look at that. I've also put some resources from Twinkle about autism and dyslexia into the show notes as well, so do have a look at those resources. And thanks again for listening to Sending the Experts with me, Georgina Durrant. Please spread the word that you're listening and share on social media so others want to listen too. Thanks.